Hello, people. Okay, now what we're going to be doing a couple of different things. We're changing percentages into fractions and decimals, but you do need to write things down, okay? Because as I go through this, and then when you do the exercise, you need to know how to do it. So the first thing is changing, so writing a percentage as a fraction. Okay, that's your first little heading. And then this is what you have to do. You have to, so you can write this down, you have to divide your percentage by 100 and simplify it if possible. So those are your two steps. So you divide by 100 and then simplify. Okay? So pause me if you need to write that down, and then I'll do an example for you. Okay, so first example is we've got 16%. So what do we have to do? First thing said, divide it by 100. So when you divide it by 100, you're basically putting it over a fraction. You're doing that, dividing by 100. So you've made it into a fraction. Now simplify it. So, 2 goes into 16 8 times, 2 goes into 150 times. Or you can make that smaller. 2 goes in there 4 times, 2 goes in there 25. So that'll be the total. 4 over 25 will be your lowest answer that you can go. So that's how you change a percentage into a fraction. If you've got one that is bigger than 100, it doesn't matter. So you've got 120%. You make it 120 over 100. You can then say, well, how many times does 100 go into 120? It goes in once with 20 left over. You use your same denominator. Now you make that smaller. Well, I can chop zeros off, and then I can divide that 2 by 1, so I could make that equals 1 and 1 over 50. And that would be the lowest that it could go. So you would have changed that. All right, so that is simplifying. So give yourself some examples there and write down those rules. Now we're going to look at a fractional percentage. Okay, let's get rid of all these things here. Okay, so now what we're going to be looking at is fractional percentage. Oh, honey, please excuse my dog. I think she wants to be on the video. Fractional percentage as a fraction. Okay. So that's your next heading. What are your notes for that? You have to divide by 100 over 1. Now, remember, when you're dividing in fractions, I'll show you exactly what I mean. But what I want you to write is divide by 100, and then in brackets, I want you to go times by 1 over 100. You'll know what I mean once I've explained that. So make sure that's in your notes. Okay, pause me because I'm going to keep going. All right, what they're saying is when you divide it. So say you've got 1/4%. All right. So first of all, what they want you to do is divide it by 100 over 1. Now, when you're doing fractions and you do 1 over 4 divided by 100 over 1. Sure you remember that to divide your in fractions, you actually do the opposite. You're timesing it, and by you timesing it, you switcheroo these two around. So by switcherooing those around, you're actually going to go 1 over 4 times by 1 over 100. Okay? Because in doing this, we are dividing because we're doing the opposite of dividing, which is timesing, and we've switched this around. So now we're going to go 1 times 1 is 1, and 4 times 100 is 400, and that's going to be our answer. Okay, so in actual fact, you are multiplying by 1 over 100. So let's do another example. Let's do 1/5. Let's move this all up. Okay, let's do 1/5 was the percentage. So we're going to go 1 over 5 times by 1 over 100. So that gives you 1 over 500, and that's your answer. So in your notes, you're basically going to say you need to multiply by 1 over 100 to change a fractional percentage to a fraction. Okay. Right, please make sure you've written those notes and that you have got an example. We're moving on. Next thing we're moving on to is percentages as a fraction. So you've got a percentage that, so let me write that heading up for you. Let's do a different color. Percentage, oh, that doesn't look like a percentage as a fraction. Now, this one's not too difficult because we know that all percentages are out of 100. So what you do is you take your fraction, so make into a fraction over 100. Okay, so please write those notes and I'll share you an example. Just pause me when you need to. So we've got 48.2%. Right, now I want that as a fraction. So I go 48.2 over 100 because that's what my notes told me to do and that's what you got to do. But there's a problem here because we can't have a decimal in a fraction. So we bump that one out, shoop, we make it bigger, we make it 482, which means because what we do to the top, we have to do to the bottom, we've now got 1,000. So we've now got 482 over 1,000. And then you've got to simplify it. Well, you can see both of those. I wouldn't know what goes into 482, but I do know that 2 is even, and I know that 1,000 is even. So let's go here. So we can say, well, 400 is using my calculator now. 482 divided by 2 gives you 241. And I know 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. Doesn't look like anything, so it's going to stay as 241. One more example. If you have got 3.75%, I want to have that. So first of all, we have to make it over 100 to make it into a fraction. So we go 3.75 over 100. Who can see what the problem is? Yes, there's a decimal point. So to get rid of it, we've got to go once, twice, which means we've got to give him 2 more zeros. So now we've got 375 over 10,000. Okay, let's move it over. Now I can see, because that ends in a 5 and that ends in 0, that 5 will go into that, but I'll use my calculator. 375 divided by 5 gives me 75. And if I divide 10,000 divided by, I should get 200 I think, by 5, 2,000. And I can make that smaller still. Well, 5 goes in there once, so that 5 will go into there, 15, and 5 will go into 2,000. So you see how you bring it down? I never bring it down straight away to the lowest. I'm not that smart. Okay, and then 5 will go into there 3 times, and 5 will go into there 8 times. Okay, now we can't bring it down anymore. So that means that we've brought it down to the lowest. Now remember, you're not going to get the full mark if you don't bring it down to the lowest. Next one I'm going to show you is percentages as decimals. So let's move this up. Let's write our heading. Percentage as decimals. Now with this one, yes, that's right, decimals. All you're going to do is move your decimals 2 places because you're just dividing it by 100. So all you're going to do, you're going to move decimal 2 spaces to the left. Okay, so just pause me and write that down. We'll do an example now. And so if you've got a 23% and you're going to go once, twice, your answer is going to be 0.23. You've changed it into a decimal. We'll do another one. If we've got 171, 2 spaces to the left. So your decimal's always at the end, 1, 2. Your answer is 1.7. 1. Okay, and I'll give you another example. We've got 3.49, 2 spaces to the left, 1, 2, so we've got to fill in a gap there, so it's 0.0349. Okay, and then the following fractional percentages as decimals. This is going to be our last one, so let's write that up. Fractional percentage, I can't fill it in, percentage, as a decimal. So what we do, first of all, there's 2 steps. Make sure you underline, this must look pretty, hey? Write the fraction as a decimal. Now, they'll give you ones that you should know, okay? So the first thing is write the fraction as a decimal. The next is divide by 100, which means 2 spaces left. Very similar to the last one. Okay, write that down and we'll do an example now. So much stuff here. Okay, so our example is, honey, 0.5%. Now, change that into a decimal. You know that it's 0.5. And move it 2 spaces to the left. Once, twice. So my answer is 0.005. Okay, do another one. Another example, 3 1/5. Well, I know that it's 3 point, and I've made that into, it would be 3.2. Move it 2 spaces to the left, 1, 2, so it'll be 0.032. Okay, guys, go ahead and start the exercise.